The ancient Black Arabs. Anu M Bantu. Kortyo past Goikelskn Gordit. Io paste Goikelskn Kortyo past. Goikelskn Gordyo past Goikelsksi. Gordyo past Goikelskn. Wordyo past Goikelskn Gordui. O paste Goikelskn Gordyo pastvs. Jakelskn Gordyo past Goikelsk. Vibn Gordyo past Goikelskn Ku. Ordyo past Goikelskn Gorduik. Past Goikelskn Gordyo pastft. Jakelskn Gordyo past Goikelsksi. Ngordyo past Goikelskn Gwit. LTSIPAEN. LIPRSRRWSET1 equals. The Ancient Black Arabs. By Anu M Bantu. The Ancient Black Arabs. By Anu M Bantu. Pomegranate Publishing. London. Copyright 2012 Anu M Bantu. All rights reserved. No part of this book may be reprinted or reproduced or utilized in any form or by any electronic, mechanical, or other means, now or hereafter invented, including photocopying and recording, or in any information storage or retrieval system, without permission in writing from the publishers. Pomegranate Publishing. London. Introduction. It is generally assumed that black people are only found in sub-Saharan Africa as indigenous populations. The truth is black people can be found as indigenous populations throughout Asia from the westernmost to the eastern extremity. In this ebook we shall reveal the original Black Arabs of Arabia and look at the origins of Arab ethnicity. One of the oldest doctors known from history is the Roman medical expert Galen. He made a comment which can only be understood as showing that the ancient Arabs of his day were black. In Ethiopians, Arabs, and all other southern peoples the skin has been roasted by the ambient heat and by the effect of the internal heat being drawn outwards, and so becomes hard, dry and black. Galen, Selected Works by P. N. Singer, Oxford University Press 1997 p. 257. This would mean Arabs and Ethiopians had the same general complexion. Present-day South Arabians. Carlton Kuhn was a mid-20th century anthropologist who was very well known at the time. This is what he wrote about the present-day people of Arabia. The Yemen consists geographically of two main parts, separated by a formidable barrier. The first part is the Tehama, a narrow coastal strip in which sand dunes alternate with fields of sorghum, and occupied by Negroid serfs from Africa and small, elf-like, brachycephalic men, whose racial origin is still a mystery. Papers of the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology Vol. XX edited by Carlton S. Kuhn and J. M. Andrews, Harvard University 1943. p. 188. One of the two parts of Yemen, according to Kuhn, is inhabited by people who look African and a second race with round heads. Brachycephalic, but whose color he does not describe. He also wrote about the southern Arabians outside Yemen. The population of southern Arabia, aside from Yemen, consists of two major elements, Mediterranean and Bedoid. In the Hadramaut Valley, the agriculturalists are predominantly Mediterranean, among the Bedouin, and among the wilder tribes of the Dhofar region, the Bedoid element increases in importance. There is, however, a third element, frizzly-haired, short-statured, round-headed, which occurs among sporadic individuals, and which is presumably Negrito. Individuals possessing these traits are not to be confused with the African Negro hybrids. The tribesmen of Cape Musandam, in Oman, are said to be predominantly Negrito. Kuhn, 1943, p. 189-190. The Negritos are clearly a minority group in Oman outside Cape Musandam. Of the Bedoids, one of the two main physical types of Oman. According to Kuhn, we are told, in the highlands of Dhofar survive pre-Arabic Semitic languages, and a cattle culture comparable to that of the Tota of India on the one hand and of the East African Hamites and Bantu on the other. Kuhn, 1943, p. 189. It is clear from these accounts there are still black people in Arabia today, especially in the south. The three physical types are those resembling the Vedas of Sri Lanka, hence called Vetoid, those who look African, and the Negritos. The ethnic names of the Vetoid are Mara, Shahara, Harsusa, and Bodhahara. They trace their ancestry from a traditional ancestor named Yarub who was descended from Joktan the Shemite in the Bible. The Arabic name for Joktan is Cotton. Clearly not all black people were imagined to be descended from Ham. Cotton's grandson was Abd Shams Saba, who was the ancestor of the Yemenites in general. He had two sons called Himyar and Kalan. The former became father to the town and village dwellers, while the latter became father to the Bidu nomads. Many of the nomads, or Bidu of Oman, belong to the Azdite families and are descended from Kalan. For the info in this paragraph, see History of the Imams and Sayyids of Oman, 651-1856 CE, by Solalai B. N. Razik, translated by George Percy Badger, The Hochliot Society 1871. In the above account of traditional ancestors of the southern Arabs, we can recognize the names of famous ancient civilizations of Arabia such as the Sabaeans and Himyarites, the boast of the black race. In the 9th century there was an Arabic writer named Uthman al-Ya'is who had an African grandfather. Al-Ya'is was one of the most educated men in the world of his day and was attached to the royal court of the Abbasid dynasty in Iraq. He was disturbed by the rise of negative racial attitudes towards Africans and so wrote a volume called The Boast or Superiority of the Blacks over the Whites. This is the first known instance in history of a scholar of black descent exercising a right to counter racism. Al-Ya'is also openly talks about how many Arab tribes have black sections called Qudr. The name of an Arab tribe is usually preceded by the term Banu, meaning sons of. In his own words he said, the Qudr of Banu, Muharrab, boasted of their black skins. The blacks are called Qudr, lit. Green, by the Arabs. The Glory of Blacks over the Whites by Uthman al-Ya'is, 9th century BC, Islamic Quarterly Vol XXV No. 1 and 2, 1981, p. 18. Al-Ya'is also quotes an ancient Arab poet as saying, from the Qudr clan of the tribe of Qays am I held to be descended by every man of virtue. Al-Ya'is, 1981, p. 18. Al-Ya'is also tells us that the Mughira are the Qudra of the famous tribe of Makhzum. This means when we see the name Al-Mughira in Arabic names it refers to someone from or descended from this clan of the Makhzum. Al-Ya'is also quotes another ancient Arab poet who said, I am Al-Akhdar, known to all, the man of dark skin in the land of the Arabs. Al-Ya'is, 1981, p. 18. Compare this with what a source dealing with Saudi Arabian peoples has to say. The highest incidence of Negroid phenotypic features appear in the Tahama, while the Bedouin, especially in the Nejd, tends to the more classic Mediterranean type, though there is Negroid admixture in some areas. In a large band from Khabar and the Shamar area to the Wadi Dawasir there are extensive Bedouin-Negro mixes, the Banu Qudayr. Historical and Cultural Dictionary of Saudi Arabia by Carol L. Riley, Scarecrow Press Inc. 1972 p. 90. It is clear that the Qudra tribes in the Hara, of Al-Ya'is, who are black are the Banu Qudayr of the Cultural Dictionary who are Bedouin-Negro mixes. We can recognize both the name and the black ancestry. The Prophet's family. Al-Ya'is also tells us of the family of the Prophet Muhammad's grandfather. The 10 lordly sons of Abd al-Muttalib were very black in color and large of body. Al-Ya'is, 1981, p. 18. Al-Ya'is went on to speak of wholly black Arab tribes. The Arab tribes, in tradition, were believed to be collectively descended from Shem, thus showing his readers that the story of black skin being the result of the curse of Ham is false. In his own words, "It is the environment that has made us black." The proof of this is the fact that there are black tribes among the Arabs, such as the Banu Sulaim ibn Mansur. All who dwell in the Hara other than the Banu Sulaim are also black. Al-Ya'as, 1981, p. 23. The Hara is a basalt desert around Medina. The Banu Sulaim were based near Medina. Al-Ashta al-Nakeh, a Yemenite, and a vehement partisan of Ali son of Abu Talib. History of Islamic Civilization Vol 4, from Umayyads and Abbasids by Georgi Zaydani, translated by D.S. Margoliouth, A.J.W. Gibb. Memorial Series 1907 p. 66. Many of the people of Medina were from the Banu Sulaim and other Hara-based tribes. We have been told by al-Ya'is that these tribes were black. We should wonder whether the color of the people of Medina and the color of Muhammad's paternal family played a role in what followed after the Prophet's death. When Muhammad died, there were two candidates to succeed him. One was Abu Bakr and the other was Ali ibn Abu Talib, the paternal cousin of Muhammad. Abu Bakr became the caliph because more people voted for him. Al-Ya'as tells us that Abu Talib's family was more or less black-colored, and this would obviously include his son Ali. We are then rather interestingly told by one source that the people of Medina had already chosen as caliph Ali son of Abu Talib, they being mostly helpers. Zaydani, 1907, p. 60. The black tribes near, and presumably in, Medina chose Ali son of Abu Talib, whose family was more or less black-colored. We then learn from the same source that the bulk of the Yemenites became partisans of Ali. He therefore made overtures to the tribe of Kalb, and married one of their women, named Badal, who became the mother of his son Yazid. Zaydani, 1907, p. 66. Even today Yemen has, as we have already seen, an African-looking population dominating half the country. At this time an even larger section of Yemen would have been black. It would appear the black tribes, regions, and towns backed Ali. The Qudra were the original Arabs. In an address the Prophet made on the occasion of his last pilgrimage given in the Hadith of Bukhari, he said, "No Arab has superiority over a non-Arab, and no non-Arab has superiority over an Arab. No black man has superiority over a red man, and no red over a black dot." This statement by the Prophet is interesting because firstly Arab and black occur in parallel contexts, implying they are one and the same. Conversely, non-Arab and red occur in parallel context, implying they too are one and the same. The test of the logic is to see whether the Arabs of the time of the Prophet referred to non-Arabs as red. In this connection we are pleased to quote the following. The Arabs, as we have seen, believed themselves at this time to be superior to all other nations. The others, as has been said, were called by them the red, a term often used especially of clients. Zaydani, 1907, p. 71. A client is a freed slave. Non-Arabs were red and equated with client status. This essentially confirms our logic. The Arabic authority Bernard Lewis also makes a statement which backs this logic, although this was not his intention. In early Arabic poetry and historical narrative, the Persians are sometimes spoken of as the red people, with a suggestion of ethnic hostility. This seems to date back to pre-Islamic times, to Arab resistance to Persian imperial penetration in Arabia. After the Arab conquest of Iran, the roles were reversed. The term red people acquired a connotation of inferiority, and was used in particular reference to the non-Arab converts to Islam. Redness is similarly ascribed to the conquered natives of Spain, to the Greeks, and to other Mediterranean peoples of lighter skin than the Arabs. Race and Color in Islam by Bernard Lewis, 1972, p. 8. Again we can see that being non-Arab was equated with being European or a light-skinned. Tucked away in the following roundabout statement, Lewis tells us what color the Arabs used for self-reference. Again, this is done unintentionally. On the specific question of color, ancient Arabian literature is very instructive. Human beings are freak. Antly described by words we might translate as black, white, red, green, yellow, and two shades of brown, one lighter and one darker. These terms are used in a personal rather than ethnic sense, and would correspond to such words as swarthy, sallow, blonde, or ruddy in our own modern usage more than to words like black and white. Sometimes they are used ethnically, but even then in a relative rather than absolute sense. The Arabs, for example, sometimes describe themselves as black in contrast to the Persians who are red, but at other times as red, or even white, in contrast to the Africans who are black. Lewis, 1972, p. 8. We can use the very logic Lewis displays, later in this book, to ask the questions of when does the Persian contrast date to and when does the African contrast date to? The Persian contrasts are from pre- and early Islamic times while the African contrasts are from later. Lewis himself gives evidence of the first when he writes of the Arabs fighting Persian domination. This occurred just before the advent of Islam. We can also time the change from the Arabs being Qudra to the Arabs becoming of every conceivable complexion. The following scholar tells us this indirectly. After the 2nd century of the Hijra, except in the desert or where there was little communication with foreigners, the blood of the Arabs contained only a small Arab strain. The word Arab has come to have a wider denotation, being extended to various countries. Syrians, Egypt, Ians, inhabitants of Iraq, and Morocco are called Arabs, whereas they are in truth a mixture of Arabs, Turks, Daylamites, Circassians, Greeks, Persians, Armenians, Georgians, etc. Zaydani, 1907, p. 214. The Hijra happened around 622 AD and the 2nd century after would have began around 723 AD. In that century the Arabs became progressively mixed as their domination of West Asia led to massively increased mixing with non-Arabs. In many parts of West Asia and in Brazil where there has been centuries of mixing between Africans and Europeans there are a variety of complexions, but this does not mean black and white should be taken as pale and tanned varieties of Caucasian as Lewis seems to imply earlier. Another take on it would be to look at India where every conceivable human complexion exists in what appears to be one population. Were the later Islamic Arabs, after 723 AD more like Indians or Europeans? The answer can be found in the following account. Some people prefer the blacks to the whites. What led them to this conclusion was the fact that they had seen many Arabs and Indians who possessed an abundant share of spiritual and physical gifts and whose complexion was blackish. They, the Sudan, are unlike the Indians, whose complexions vary between black, brown, and white, for heat in India does not reach the same degree of perfect scorching. The same is true of Arab countries. But the heat of the land of Habesh and Zanjay reaches the extreme limit of scorching. Anji. They find beauty in intense blackness and abhor whiteness, and hold that a white man cannot be healthy. Sharaf al-Zaman Marvaza 13. Th century in the history of Arab Islamic geography, 9. Th. Minus 16. Th century, by Saeed Makbul Ahmed, published by Al-Bayt University, 1995. More evidence for the reference to black actually meaning black comes from Lewis speaking of the Arab conquest of Egypt. Ubaydah, the Arab chronicler tells us, was black. The Muqawqis was frightened by his blackness. There are two interesting points about this story. The second, and far more important, is that Ubaydah is not an African nor even of African descent but, as the chroniclers are careful to point out, a pure and noble Arab on both sides. Here black is still a personal and relative term, describing an individual's complexion and not of a race. Blackness is not despised among us means no more than that persons of a dark complexion are not considered inferior to those of light complexion. Lewis, 1972, p. 10. Ubaida was a noble Arab on both sides of his family. Given what we have learned earlier, there is nothing surprising about this. Lewis suggests that this means he was simply a deeply tanned Caucasian, but why would such a person frighten Muqawqis, a leader in a Mediterranean country? The term black here clearly means black, and the Muqawqis refused to deal with him because the Byzantine rulers of Egypt despised black people. We find another example of someone with black eye and their name, but there is no evidence that they were African. Al-Miqdad ibn Amr, otherwise known as Al-Miqdad ibn al-Aswad and Al-Miqdad al-Kindi, was an early convert to Islam from Yemen, whose patronymic was Abu Ma'bad. He fled to Abyssinia, was believed to be one of the few Islamic horsemen at Badr. Some scholars suspect that Al-Miqdad was of African slave origin, but such allegations cannot be substantiated. He took part in the conquest of Syria and Egypt, but also engaged in the propagation of 42 traditions. Brief Lives of the Companions of the Prophet Muhammad by Muhammad Abdul Beg, Cambridge 2003 p. 84. An example of such an individual. Thus saith Muhammad ibn Ishaq, al-Nadim. Most of the scholars think that grammar was derived from Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali, and that Abu al-Aswad learned it from the commander of the faithful Ali ibn Abi Talib, for whom may there be the blessing of Allah. Abdul Beg, 2003, p. 87. Others disagree and say Nasr ibn Asim al-Du'ali, al-Ladi, developed grammar by himself. This is what Ibn Khaldun had to say about this man, Abul Aswad ad-Durali. He was one of the most eminent among the Tabis, an inhabitant of Basra, and a partisan of Ali ibn Abi Talib. In intelligence he was one of the most perfect of men, and in reason one of the most sagacious. He was the first who invented grammar. It is said that Ali laid down for him this principle: the parts of speech are three, the noun, the verb, and the particle. He was the Qadi of B. Ashra and died in 688 AD. Biographies of Ibn Khaldun Vol 1, translated by William McGuckin Deslane, Cosimo Inc. p. 663. Clearly there were a number of such Arab individuals who had black as an element of their name, whether as father of black or son of black. The Umayyads. In the time of Muawiyah, the Umayyad regarded the clients as mere satellites and slaves. When they became numerous, Muawiyah took fright, and bethought him of massacring them all or partially. Before actually resorting to this measure, he asked the advice of some of the chief statesmen who were also his intimate associates, such as Al-Anaf ibn Qais and Samarat ibn Junda. He told them that he found this red race, i.e. the clients, were ousting the earlier Muslims, and he was in hourly dread of an assault by them on the Arabs and the supreme power. Zaydani, 1907, p. 72. Muawiyah was an Umayyad caliph who died in 680 AD. This agrees with the logic of the dates for the racial change amongst the Arabs. The attitude of the early Arabs towards the red race also comes through in this extract, where we are told that Arabs would unite against non-Arabs, such as Persians, Turks, etc., whom they call Ajam, i.e. barbarians, the word meaning dumb, whether the word came from the name or inversely. Against these they would boast of the superiority of their descent and language, and they would treat the barbarians generally with disdain. The word Akhzar, meaning narrow-eyed, was applied by them to the barbarians, an insulting epithet, which if addressed to an Arab, was thought to imply he was no true Arab. Zaydani, 1907, p. 5. Those referred to as Ajam or dumb are the same people referred to as red. Also along the same lines we learn from another source. The Turks, the Bulgar, the Blaga, the Burgaz, the Hazar, the Elan, and the types with small eyes and extreme blondness have No script, except that the Bulgarians and Tibetans write with Chinese and Manichaean, whereas the Hazars write in Hebrew. The Faraist of Al-Nadim, 10th Century Survey of Muslim Culture Volume I, edited and translated by Bayard Dodge, Columbia University Press. 1970 p. 36-7. We can see that the small i's that Arab authors attributed to the northern peoples like the Persians and Turks were the same as the narrow-eyed reference Akhzar directed at Turks and Hazars. It is clear that the early Arabs had a variety of epithets to describe non-Arab lighter-skinned peoples and were not always bothered about distinguishing Orientals from European types. This is why they describe the small-eyed people as having extreme blondness. What about all the anti-African and racist comments written by pre-Islamic poets? This does not suggest that the Arabs of the time were black. Once again, things are not as they seem. Bernard Lewis explains that the evidence of the Quran on the lack of racial prejudice in pre-Islamic and the earliest Islamic times is borne out by such fully authenticated fragments of contemporary literature as survive. Lewis, 1972, p. 7. This introduces a new element into the discussion. Most writings from such times are fragments needing authentication. It is rare that a whole book will survive from that period. There are verses, indeed many verses, attributed to pre-Islamic and early Islamic poets which would suggest very strongly a feeling of hatred and contempt directed against persons of African birth. Most if not all these, however, almost certainly belong to later periods and reflect later problems, attitudes, and preoccupations. Such projection backwards into early Islamic or pre-Islamic times is a very common feature, and a recurring difficulty in Islamic scholarship. Lewis, 1972, p. 9. Lewis then gives another example. Kufuf was a man of position and a chief in his tribe, something which would have been impossible a century later. It is surely a later poet who composed the verse in which Kufuf remarks that his tribe had made him chief despite his dark pedigree. Lewis, 1972, p. 26. This is an important admission on the part of Lewis. It shows that not only did anti-black practices of prejudice become common once the fears of Caliph Muawiyah had been realized, but Arab history was rewritten to include this prejudice. It was projected backwards to times when the Arabs were black. The irony is tragic. The identities of some prejudiced Arab writers are also interesting. We are told by James H. Sweet of the University of Wisconsin that in the early 8th century Wahb ibn Munabbih, an Arab of Persian origin, wrote that black people were the result of Ham's curse. Sour, The Idea of Race, Its Changing Meanings and Constructions by James H. Sweet. http://sjamerica.wiki/file/view/the+idea+of+race.pdf. The Persian origin of Wahb ibn Munabbih is confirmed by Zaydani. They were the descendants of that Persian army that came to the assistance of Sa'if ibn Yazan the Himyarite against the Abyssinians, who had conquered the country. Sa'if fled to the king of Persia, who, after negotiations, dispatched some 1,000 Persian soldiers under a commander named Waraz. In a battle fought after the arrival of the Persians in Yemen, the latter were victorious, and the government was taken over by Sa'if with Waraz for 4 years. He made slaves of the Abyssinians, who however, one day slew him in the chase, and fled to the mountain tops. They were sought and killed, but the Yemenites were depressed by the death of Sa'if, and did not appoint a ruler from among themselves, and remained under the government of the Persians until the rise of Islam. When the Persian army had obtained possession of Yemen, they married Arab women, and the offspring of these marriages got the title sons. Distinguished persons who thus originated were Taz ibn Kaysan and Wahb ibn Munabbih, who lived early in Islam. Zaydani Vol. 4, 1907, p. 41. When speaking of anti-black Arab authors from history, we should always look at the time when the prejudiced statement was written and the background of the author. How the change took place. In the Arabic literature there are clues as to how the change took place. We are told of the color of two members of the Prophet's extended family. Abd Allah ibn Abbas had very dark skin and was large of body. The family of Abu Talib is more or less black-colored. Al-Ya'as, 1981, p. 81. But the same was not said of Ibn Abbas' grandson. Of Ali ibn Abd Allah ibn al-Abbas it was said, he was of a fair complexion, large of body, and wore a long beard. Zaydani, 1907, p. 219. The same can be seen with the descendants of Ali son of Abu Talib, here called Abi Talib. Ali's son, al-Husayn, married a Persian princess. Abu al-Hasan Ali, the son of al-Husayn, the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib, is generally known by the appellation Zayn al-Abidin. His mother Silafa was a daughter to Yezdi-Gurd, the last king of Persia. Zaydani, 1907, p. 209. A few generations later the Abbasid dynasty, descended from Ibn Abbas, was in control of the Islamic Empire. It was said of them, under the Abbasids, the Persian converts to Islam gained much influence, with a number of the Abbasids marrying Persian women whose children later turned towards Persia. The rivalry between al-Rashid's two sons, al-Amin and al-Mamun, has itself often been simplistically portrayed as an ethnic conflict between the Arab and the Persian camps because al-Amin's mother was Arab and al-Amun's mother was Persian. Introduction to Historical Dictionary of Iraq by Edmund A. Garib and Beth Doherty, Scarecrow Press 2004 Pli. Perhaps this portrayal of the pro-Persian nature of al-Mamun's regime is not simplistic. Ali's half-Persian grandson, Zayn al-Abidin, had a descendant of whom we are told. Abul Hasan Ali ar-Rida ibn Musa al-Qasim ibn Jafar as-Sadiq ibn Muhammad al-Bakir, the son of Ali Zayn al-Abidin, is considered by that sect of Shii called Imamites as one of the 12 Imams. Al-Mamun marries him to his daughter Habib, and, having nominated him successor to the caliphate, he caused his name to be inscribed on gold and silver coinage. Deslane, 2013, p. 212. It would appear the half-Persian Al-Mamun wanted to give the caliphate to another person of Persian descent. The Arab family of Caliph Al-Mamun's father placed Ibrahim al-Mahdi, the son of a black woman, as counter-caliph in Baghdad in response to the pro-Persian policies. This led to Caliph al-Mamun backing down and handing back the succession to his father's family. Conclusion. In conclusion, we can see that the Roman period description of Arabs and Ethiopians by Galen give both the same black color. There are still black people in Arabia today, and in some instances they can be distinguished from more recent black arrivals from Africa. We can even pinpoint the time when the Arabs stopped being predominantly black and became a range of complexions. This happened in the early 8th century BC. As mixing progressed after the Islamic Empire started, the black Arabs gradually became a minority. See our website, http://www.pom-granite.org. Like our Facebook page, https://www.facebook.com/pomegranate publishing. Other titles from the Pomegranate Library include: For those who want to avoid an African origin of civilization, Sumer, in southern Iraq, has been a safe alternative. Not anymore. The last hiding place has been taken. http://black-sumer-african-civilization-ebook/dp/b009 mrlv Lee http://www.amazon.com/black-sumer-afr Icon origins civilization http://www.amazon.com/the-black-mythana-christ-ebook/dp/b00d1yep62 http://www.amazon.com/the-black-goddess-bible-ebook/dp/b00d9vcopq http://www.amazon.com/unmistakably-black-sculpture-scivalization-ebook/dp/b00bwa1w0e http://www.amazon.com/unmistakably-black-sculpture-scivalization-ebook/dp/b00c9rh8p2 http://www.amazon.com/unmistakably-black-sculpture-scivalization-ebook/dp/b00b-ebook/b6y7y http://www.amazon.com/unmistakably-black-sculpture-paintings-ebook/dp/b00c865rh-wh-tp/mosaics-ebook/dp/b00c6f1y7a http://www.amazon.com/unmistakably-black-sculpture-civilization-ebook/dp/b00c82vu7a http://www.amazon.com/the-ancient-black-hebrews-ebook/dp/b00cmusgie http://www.amazon.com/the-blackheads-africans-mesopotamias-ebook/dp/b00bepywsg http://www.amazon.com/afro-hair-ancient-egyptians-ebook/dp/b00b-nu51a http://www.amazon.com/eden-biblical-garden-discovered-ebook/dp/b0063i5wem http://www.amazon.com/eden-east-african-land-ebook/dp/b00d62g220 http://www.amazon.com/eden-african-ancient-worlds-ebook/dp/b00doi2ui http://origins-egyptian-predynastic-civilization-ebook/dp/b00bevar63s http://www.amazon.com/african-origin-egyptians-ebook/dp/b00blsnsoa http://www.amazon.com/african-rulers-medieval-yemen-ebook/dp/b0079sgr4 http://www.amazon.com/african-rulers-medieval-yemen-volume/dp/14782381000 http://www.amazon.com/black-sumer-physical-evidence-ebook/dp/b00bk9x7sc http://www.amazon.com/black-sumer-physical-evidence-ebook/dp/b00c1sky9g